right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Oh Hell No podcast. Tonight I have Ken Korber. He is a trained surgical and cardiovascular physician assistant, right? He's
Right,
also a clinical assistant professor, an author,
right,
and educator. He's got a lot
right.
of jobs, guys.
Keep
Welcome.
keeps me out of trouble.
Yes, that's good. Welcome to the podcast, Ken. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So when you were a kid, what did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
Well, I think when I was in seventh grade, I liked when we dissected a frog in my science class.
Ooh.
So that might have been one of the sort of triggers. But my dad was a biology teacher in high school, so we always had the science kind of stuff at the dinner table conversations all the time. So I was kind of raised in that environment of curiosity about science, and then that evolved into the medical piece of it, where I said, well, it would be kind of fun to help people who are sick or who are vulnerable. So that's kind of what drove the whole high school college thing. I did not get into medical school, so I was thinking about reapplying to medical school after I graduated from college, and with my biology degree, like everyone did back then. And I met a PA who was working at the VA hospital in vascular surgery, and she said, don't try to go to medical school. That'll take too long. Go to this PA program idea that was about 10 years old at that point. And I started investigating it, and I applied, and the next year I got into the program in Philadelphia. So that sort of took me on my path of patient care from
Wow.
that point
So
forward.
how many years is a PA program usually?
So it's a master's program after college. So you get a master's degree, and depending a little bit on, they vary a little bit, but they tend to be about 2 years long. But
Oh,
it's 2 years straight with no break.
yeah.
So it's like 24, 27, 28 months of pretty intense classroom and then patient encounter, what we call rotation experiences in different specialty areas of medical practice.
Oh, okay. My daughter loves science and she was so excited about dissecting the frog. So when you said that,
Yeah,
I was like, oh my gosh. And she has dreams of becoming something in the medical profession. So
that's
I
great.
hope
Oh
she's
my gosh,
with it. Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, she loves science. So that's good. So what do you love about doing the work that you've been doing for most of your life? Like what is the thing about it that you're drawn to the most?
So I think the clinical side of things. So my first career
Mhm.
as a PA, I always had an interest and desire to help people that were less fortunate than myself. So the passion behind that was to learn and to experience ways of making their lives better. So that patient clinician encounter, in an office setting or a hospital setting or the operating room, um, filled that prescription right away. That I could see direct responses and outcomes from what I was saying, and how I was engaging in a relationship with a patient and with their families.
Yeah.
So that was the positive feedback from that was very, very, very good and very important. So that drove me, into different areas of medicine. Um, the second career was sort of a spin-off of that, when I recognized after 10 years of experience that we could never spend enough time with patients to explain to them what was going on,
Mhm.
to help them understand what their diabetes was all about, or to help them understand what their broken bone, how it was going to heal, or why they had a heart attack, or anything like that. So the books became a way of my problem solving, that inability to spend more than 10 minutes with a patient because of the system that's out there. It was never adequate enough to fully explain and educate them about their lives, which was, something that they should buy into, and become partners with me and my colleagues to help make themselves get better. Whether it was, stopping smoking or eating less sugar or having less salt in their diets. 10 minutes in a clinic setting was never enough time. So
Yeah.
the books then became my way of extending to, certainly for kids, from a health literacy perspective, to explain to them in kid language uh, what it was, why it was important that they learn about fire prevention and burn safety at the home, using my characters as narrators of those stories, for example, or why it's important to brush your teeth twice a day to prevent cavities and, as it turns out, heart disease later on in life. And by extension, when the parents were reading the stories to the kids, they kind of learned stuff too at the same time. So the bedtime story session then became an extension of a 10-minute office visit with a family. And you then use that experience as a way to kind of push them down a path that was a little more centered on wellness
Mhm.
and healthy living and changing lifestyles. So in ways that were easier for them to do, to kind of make them better
Okay.
patients and have better longer lives.
So, guys, Ken is talking about his second career as an author. So he
Right.
writes books, and they're specifically children's books, and they cover a lot of different areas in health and wellness. And we're going to talk about his books. But before we do, I want to know, when did you realize that you love to write, or you had like that writing bug?
Yeah, it's important to share with your audience the fact that you don't have to become a journalist in order for you to write a story, right? Or to communicate important stories about your experiences or your expertise or your life, as sort of a case study for other people to learn from. So I never had a formal writing training background. I would write a couple of articles for the medical journals just to share my and communicate my experiences with patients with certain diseases, and how we treated them or how we diagnosed them in a way that was different from somebody else. So the medical writing was what started it all, based on my training. And then the sort of the commercial side, or the patient education side, with the musical adventures of Grace, then sort of became a spin-off of that idea, where I created characters that would become narrators for the kids and their families in a more um, consumer friendly or family friendly story, as opposed to a hardcore medical article kind of a thing.
So, what was your first book, and who was that character? And then how did you build on that?
Sure, that's a great question. So my son is a music person. He's the non-health person in the family. So we one Christmas break, when he came home from school, he had all these music sheets with him, and I saw these little tiny notes on the page of the different compositions that he was practicing on his cello. And I said, "What's that little note?" And he said, "Well, that's a grace note, and it's kind of an inconsequential note that a conductor sometimes uses to color a piece to make it more exciting for an audience to hear, as part of the compositions piece." So then the next day I said, "Oh my God, it's like a little note that wanted to be a big note, like an underdog kind of story, using the grace note as the sort of the character for the story." So then this musical adventures of Grace then changed over the next couple of months to something that became a Grace note who was turned into a little girl because of the magic of a holiday concert. So then that gave me a little girl character. And then the other stories then were about all her friends that she met along the way. So the musical adventures of Grace now has, 8 characters, 10 titles associated with the series. And I was able to bring my past experience into that whole mix by having spin-off stories where Grace and her friends would talk about health issues or wellness issues that kids are sort of relating to, like the toothbrushing story or the burn prevention home safety story, or a recipe book about how to cook with no salt and no sugar to prevent those kinds of health consequences. So the spin-offs were the bridge to my previous life, based on the musical adventures of Grace as kind of a new character development storyline.
So where do you get your inspiration for the next story? Like, is it from reading something or seeing something on the news, or a friend tells you, "Oh man, I went to the doctors and this happened." Where does it come from?
Yeah, it's a combination of all those things. I certainly have a background in sort of caring for the youngest members of the family, from that family medicine perspective. But for example, in 2020, um, a bunch of my customers or clients, however you want to characterize them, parents, emailed me and said, we're having trouble trying to start a conversation with our 6-year-old or our 3-year-old about this COVID stuff when it was all starting to happen. And the kids were in lockdown. They weren't going to school. They couldn't see their friends. They couldn't see their teachers. They had to wear masks, that whole thing. So we came up with an idea of having Grace and her friends try to explain that to these kids through the storybook idea or through an activity book idea. And that's where the musical adventures of Grace became Grace Fights COVID-19, the adventures of the musical Bug Squad. So it became a whole nother story to kind of address that anxiety of the parents, but to give them a resource and a tool that they can then start a conversation with the kids at the level of the kids so that the kids understood what was going on. So that kind of was one example of it. And then anything that's related to wellness and health among pediatric or young kids in the families, that's all fair game as a topic. We're now starting to talk about we're going to create stories about mental health and wellness about that as a topic. But the toothbrushing one was an oral health story. The fire prevention one was never out there as a resource for communities to teach kids about the importance of escape plans from their houses and staying away from the burners on the stove, those kinds of things. So
So,
it all varies. Yeah.
so in your stories, are there any grown-up characters that kind of go with the
Good
kids?
question. Yeah. So as we have them set up right now, Grace is kind of the boss. So she's the one that serves as kind of a narrator for the stories. So she's like an 8-year-old
Mhm.
in terms of a character. But in the audiobooks, we, in addition to having a voice of Grace read the story to the kids, we also have the same actress who does the Grace voice do a teacher voice so that it becomes then a teacher kind of narration of a story about Grace and her friends. So we have an adult in the mix from that perspective. I'm probably going to, for the most part, stay within the genre of children's books for that young emerging reader audience. But that's not saying that we can have an aunt or an uncle or a grandfather or a grandmother or a mom or dad come into the picture and do have an adult sort of interplay with Grace and her friends as well.
Yeah.
We have that flexibility.
I just thought, Ken, like, also, some children have situations where they have sick family members, right? And that would also be good too if you did bring in like a uncle that had cancer or something like that, or
Yeah,
and then Grace can explain to her friends like how uncle whatever is sick and this is what's happening, because
yeah,
that would be good too for to help to teach these kids about the illnesses that sometimes we see within our families, or even kids these days. I feel like kids these days are dying from things that we used to think were only old people problem,
right, right,
right?
right.
Kids that are like 16, 15 are like having heart attacks, heat strokes, this, that, and it's like, what? So
Yeah,
I love this whole idea. I think it's amazing. But I always like
yeah.
put my like 2 cents into people's ideas.
No, I'm going to steal every one of your comments, and I'm going to make you a co-author on my next story. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, anything like sunscreen use in the summertime, and preventing skin cancer.
Yeah.
We know the research shows that when young children are exposed to you know ultraviolet rays and don't use sunscreen, that when they're adults or when they're teenagers, they get skin cancer or they get melanoma. And that's totally preventable. So if we had Grace explain to them, what these little freckles were and what these little moles were on their bodies, that it might spark an idea, or turn the light bulb on in their heads about, oh, I should probably take better care of myself. And when mom tells me I should wear sunscreen and a hat, I should probably do that. And this is the reason why I should do that. They'll understand better. So you're absolutely right. And cancer is another topic. When they experience, older family members that have cancer, or even the diabetes thing is perfect for that sugar story. High blood pressure is perfect for that salt story.
Yeah.
We can certainly, and this is where the passion comes in for me, is that I would love to be able to change the thinking of the next generation of citizens, knowing that the current generation of adults and grandparents are lost causes. We can't change anything about them because they've already had their diseases for many years. But if we can prevent kids from getting diseases that are preventable, let's do it. And in the same frame of reference, help them how to read, learn how to read. What that's a win-win, right? So that's kind of what drives this whole thing, and I'm excited to keep doing it. And it's great because every year, babies are born. So there's always going to be a time for the next audience of 6-year-olds and 3-year-olds to understand the same stories that we've written 10 years ago. So, I
Exactly.
want to be able to give back, and this is a perfect way to do it. It's great. It's
I
really good.
love it.
Yeah.
So you don't practice anymore as a PA, do you?
I teach in a PA training program,
Hmm.
um, but I do not take care of patients at the bedside. Correct.
Okay.
I've pivoted from direct patient care to patient education.
Mhm.
So I actually do lectures in national meetings and regional meetings in the medical world about patient education and health literacy. So I use the books as the examples for the
That's
health literacy stuff.
awesome.
Yeah,
Love it. So you're
it's good.
loving this second career because I could
Oh,
just.
it's great. It's great. It really is good. It's a lot of fun. And I probably could not have done it 20 years ago or 10 years ago. The timing had to be right. I had to have all that experience under my belt before I could sort of think about these things and come up with a fun way to solve the problems. So
Right.
that's kind of why I'm doing it now, is that the timing is good.
Right. So I love it, guys. I love that Ken was doing his passion work with patients at the bedside, and then he took that passion and he built on it and continued to teach and educate. And now he's writing books for children. So you can take one career and turn it into like two, three careers. Like,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. I mean, the message. So the message to your one of the messages to your audience is that everybody is an expert at something. If you've done something for 10 years, you're an expert in whatever that is. And there's no reason why you couldn't write your own story about that and communicate it to your friends and family. And with a little luck, commercially, you could sell those books too. I mean, you could self-publish it and sell the books yourself to get your story out, just to share your experiences with the world around you. It's a lot of fun, and I totally encourage people to do it.
Absolutely. So on the Oh Hell No podcast, Ken, I always ask my guests to share an Oh Hell No moment that has taught them something or changed their perspective on something. So think of a moment where you were like, oh hell no, in your head, or maybe you said it out loud, and it kind of changed things for you. It could have been a positive, oh hell no, like maybe the first time your book got published and you're like, oh hell no, it's really real. Or, something else. Maybe someone said something to you and you were like, what?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great question. I guess so. We talked a little bit about the oh hell moment of being frustrated with 10 minutes of schedule appointments with patients.
Yeah.
So that was one driver of this whole idea. I didn't know it was going to become a children's book, as a solution. So that's number one. But the second one is probably, yeah, the reality shock of, oh my God, the publisher actually likes this. Oh my God, this is going to be a real musical adventures of Grace is going to become like a real story. Oh my God. So then I had to think, oh great, oh hell no, now I got to keep doing this, right? So it was one of those moments where I said, okay, let's try to do this as a small business, and create a business around create the creation and communication of stories that might change the lives of children and their families. So that's the small business mission statement. Uh, and that was sort of the answer to my, oh hell no, I got a book published,
That's
which I
great.
wasn't expecting at the time.
Yeah, that is amazing. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you tonight about your second and third careers. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Please tell us where we can find your books and where we can connect with you.
Great. Yes, thank you very much. So my publisher is eckartzpress.com, ECKHARTZ press.com, no space. Or you can look at my website, which is centerforfunctionallearning.com. And if you were interested in any of the books that are on that site, I send all the books out, autographed copies, for people that they can then turn around and sell on Etsy if they want.
Look at Ken. He's coming up with another lane. That's how you do it, Ken.
Oh, it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
That's
Thank you. And
awesome.
and I totally appreciate the support of experts out there like you, who have these forums to communicate the importance of passionate projects, and um, designing your life with purpose. And I'm happy to be just an example of that, and tell your listeners and viewers that, I'm certainly open up to any questions if they want to send me an email. So that'd be fine.
Awesome. Yes, guys, get in touch with Ken because he's got the blueprint. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keisha. I appreciate it. Thank you.